We can also look at it from the perspective of the stimulus. So what I've done here is I've laid out for you a flow chart of how I think about logical reasoning from the perspective of the stimulus rather than the question stem. The stimulus being the short paragraph that contains the argument, and then the question stem, of course, being the which one of the following, if true, would strengthen or weaken, or which one of the following is necessary to assume, and so on. So the question stem approach is valuable, but at the same time, a stimulus-focused approach is also valuable, and I'll get into exactly why in a little bit. But for now, let's just look at this. So we've got the stimulus, which is an argument or a fact set. And so you see I have here, it could be a fact set or it could be an argument. If it's a fact set, that means it contains no conclusion at all. It is not making a claim. We are simply to take all the information in the stimulus, in the fact set, as being given. So that could be John has brown hair, Jane has blonde hair, George has green hair, and Dennis has no hair. Like, those are all potential facts, but they're not being combined in any way to derive a particular conclusion. They're all just separate pieces of information. Maybe you could combine them to say some people have hair, some people don't, or some people have different types of hair or different colors of hair, but it's not driving towards any point, and no one particular piece of information is supporting any other piece of information. They all stand separately. Then on the other hand, you have an argument, and most logical reasoning stimuli are arguments. If it's a fact set, then it is probably either an inference question like a must be true, a most supported, or a cannot be true. But most of the action in logical reasoning is with regard to arguments. Now, arguments are evidence supporting conclusion, evidence being taken to justify a conclusion, and that's pretty much it. Now, arguments have gaps or they don't have a gap. If there's no gap, that would be extremely rare. That would be like saying A requires B, B requires C, therefore A requires C. That would be airtight. You can't strengthen it, you can't weaken it, it's 100% guaranteed. And so for that reason, the LSAT doesn't really contain no gap arguments because they're not very interesting and there's not a whole lot you can do with them. Most logical reasoning questions are arguments that contain gaps. But when we have an argument that contains a gap, the next question is, well, how big is the gap? It could be small or it could be big. And the question then is, of course, how do you decide whether it's a small gap or a big gap? And the answer is, you personally, the test taker, you don't really have to decide. The nice thing is that LSAC is actually deciding for you, or at least they're telling you the proper perspective from which to view the argument as to the size of the gap. And they tell you that based upon the question stem.